Thank you. I'm going to read mine as best I can so I don't diverge. I've only got a few minutes apparently. By the way, Ash asked me to mention that there's a walkthrough scheduled for Saturday, February 5th, 10 a.m. at the car park at Norris Headland. He's conducted a few of these. If you want to look for yourself and see what's inside of the proposed area for the caravan park, please come down and Ash will show you. I'm up here in front of, I'm associated in this speech with Chris Core, who heads up the Friends of Coogin Nature Reserve Land Care Group. Chris? And we've got John McDonough in the crowd too, who's president of that group. Chris will speak just briefly when I finish. We've also got Kristen Ellis, who heads up the Dune Care Group here, and he may also choose to say something if I omit something. Both represent land management groups that are as equally concerned about land west of the coast road proposed for development as they are about this proposed caravan park for environmental reasons. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michael DeGood. Even though I still carry the North American speech impairment, this area has been my home for over 20 years. I'm not much different from many others in this room who chose to make a home or start a business here because, among other things, we like the balance between open space and built environment, between the number of people and the amount of nature around us. Anyway, what qualifies me to speak to you tonight about Heath? Oh, that's great. I don't need those glasses after all. Firstly, and most importantly, I'm not a specialist on Heath. However, Kristen Ellis and myself have been putting together a book on the natural history of the Tweed Coast for the past 3 years. The little production that we're working on has required some personal research, but more importantly, our work in progress is the result of contributors who are specialists in their fields. And more to the point, for the past 6 months, we've been working on the flora chapter. And I've had the extreme good fortune and, in fact, honor to receive detailed information from a long list of people, such as a gentleman by the name of Stephen Griffith, who is this state's foremost authority on heathland, and Rhonda James, who I know is a much more household word in this area, who's got me decades of experience in environmental work. Both of them have been very generous in the information they provided us. Before taking on this book project, I would have been no different from many of the others of your, much like yourselves, who would have shrugged and said, well, we might not need a caravan park, but I suppose the land that's proposed for subdivision was always going to be developed one way or another. However, in the course of Chris and I putting together this book, it hits us like a sledgehammer over and over again. We always knew the Tweed was special, but we never knew it was this special. And that statement very much applies to the vegetation to the west of the coast road that currently occupies the land proposed for subdivision. When that plan comes up, I'll keep pointing at it. Oh, good. That doesn't there yet, right? So my discussion is based obviously on that there. Okay. This is a prime example of heath, and that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. Firstly, I want to clear up something that gets right up my nose, and that is in council reports, it's been quoted as being noted as both parcels of land as degraded with little environmental value. Karen did a good job of dispelling this notion for the caravan site, and if you come on a walk on February 5th with Ash, you'll be able to see for yourself. Anyway, many of the reasons, the same reasons hold true for the proposed residential area. Make no mistake, this area is not the pristine plant community the original occupiers of this area, the Coogin clan, hunted and made camp in over 200 years ago. Yes, it was sand mined, and by virtue of that clearing and processing associated, it was absolutely hammered, no doubt about it. But 40 years later, there are numerous habitats that have recovered. How? Well, Kieran talked about the seed bank that stayed behind that has gone on to regenerate into the vibrant, diverse, recovering plant community like the one we see in the heath. Sometimes this process has been assisted by bush regeneration teams and efforts by members of groups such as the Friends of Coogin Nature Reserve and Dune Care. Other times it's happened all by itself. Before I get to specifics, I want to note that some areas have recovered better than others. While all environment has value, this one is in especially good nick for heath country. Okay, the meat of this little talk is about the heath plant community we have today, and it's 3 points I want to make. It's very special, it's important habitat, and on the Tweed coast it's rare and disappearing. On the point of it being very special, I want to note that there's some countries in the world that only have 2 or 3 types of vegetation, 2 or 3 types of plant communities. The Tweed coast, our little stretch of 37 kilometers here, has at least 14 types of vegetation. Most people would recognize some of these plant communities without knowing a thing about botany. In the foothills, we've got the dry sclerophyll, the gums. In the wetlands, we've got paper bark dominated forest. And the heathlands are another one, which is what I'm talking about tonight. There are 2 kinds of heathlands. There's wet heath and there's dry heath. We've got both types on the Tweed coast. But so what? Most of the time, isn't heath just a dry, scratchy, stunted bit of scrub? Yes, it is. But let me put this into context. Besides heath having a multitude of adaptations that allows it to grow on some of Australia's poorest soils, here's the big picture. Biodiversity. We get hammered with it all the time in the Tweed. What does it mean? Well, effectively, it's nature's wealth. Now, it's the variety of animals and plant species that make up an ecosystem. Most people in this room have had the opportunity to experience it firsthand in the subtropical rainforest. Anybody who's gone for a walk up in Mount Warning with buttressed figs towering many times overhead, and palm trees and epiphytes and crow's nest ferns and orchids, and you know what I'm talking about, to be surrounded